I'm so delighted to be launching Australian Pollinator Count. I want to thank the founding partners, Earthwatch Australia, Australian Native Bee Association, and Bees Business, who have joined with the Ween Bee Foundation to develop this citizen science program based on best practice design. The team's been working really hard to create the learning resources that can now be found in the Australian Pollinator Count Learning Library, which includes downloadable learner guides, how-to videos, and a quick quiz. These resources have been developed to help you identify the insects you see around you and help be able to allocate them to one of 12 categories. You don't need to be able to name all the different species. That would be thousands of names. You just need to be able to categorize them accurately into one of 12 groups, and the learning resources will show you how. Come join us during Australian Pollinator Week. Organise a pollinator picnic with friends and family and become citizen scientists for just one day, or even 10 minutes of one day. Participate in the Great Australian Pollinator Count and contribute to the scientific understanding of how pollinators are faring. To help you get started, here's Dr. Megan Halcroft, a science communicator, native bee specialist, and founder of Australian Pollinator Week.
Hi, I'm Megan Halcroft and I'm going to tell you all about Australian Pollinator Count. And I'm going to take you through this learner guide so that we can understand the importance of pollinators, what pollination is, and how to identify some of the more common pollinating insects. So what is pollination? So unlike animals, plants need help to reproduce because they can't move around to find a mate. So they need a pollination vector, and in this case, it's insects. And those insects help with an additional step, the plants to reproduce. So what they do is they'll land on the flower and get pollen on them. And then what they do is then, as they move around the flower, they will touch the stigma, and that's a sugary substance on the top of the stigma. And when the pollen lands on that, it will germinate because of the sugary substances. And then as it germinates, the pollen tube will grow and it will grow down the pistil of the flower and carry with it these nuclei, so the male gametes of the plant. And then they'll be carried down and they will unite with the female gamete, which is the ovule. And that's fertilization. So unlike animals, we have to have that extra step if a plant requires that extra step, which is pollination, in order to reproduce. So then you have fertilization and then you have seed set. And then the plant has the opportunity to then reproduce. So understanding that concept is really important for us to understand why we need to count the insects that are actually visiting the flower and visiting the reproductive parts of the flower. So they actually have to touch the reproductive parts of the flower in order to be considered a pollinator. So you'll see this bee here. She's got pollen on her face and on her body. And as she moves around this flower, she's going to move some of that pollen from flower to flower. So pollination is the movement of those pollen grains from flower to flower. Unlike other insects or other arthropods that might visit flowers, such as this sneaky little crab spider, it will hang out and wait to collect and eat other insects that are usually pollinators, but the spider usually hangs out on the petals and it doesn't actually touch the reproductive parts of the flower. So you can't consider it a pollinator. So what's the Australian Pollinator Count? It's a citizen science project and it's carried out once a year in spring. And it's to measure the abundance and diversity of our insect pollinators, so that the number and type of insect pollinators in our area. It's conducted during Australian Pollinator Week, just to inspire people to take on an activity during Pollinator Week. And it's that's carried out during the second full week of November each year, but it also incorporates each weekend either side of that week. So you've got every opportunity to get out there on the weekend or two and get out there and do your pollinator count. So we're harnessing citizen science. Hundreds, if not thousands, we hope, of people can go out there into their gardens, into their spaces, their parks, whatever, and they can look at their flowers, they can count their pollinators, and they're collecting localised data from all over the nation. And this is the sort of data that is impossible to collect without the assistance of citizen scientists like yourselves. And so all we need for you to become a citizen scientist in this project is to spend 10 minutes at a time watching a flower, seeing what insects will visit those flowers, going on to the reproductive parts of the flower, and then recording what types of insects are visiting those flowers in that 10 minutes. I've been asked many, many times, so how are our Australian pollinators going? How are the bees going? Well, we don't know. We just have no idea because there's been no studies done. We know from studies overseas that human activity is impacting our wildlife populations, but we don't know which way and we don't know how much because Australia hasn't conducted any significant studies that have got definitive data. Authorities need accurate data in order to make decisions. To validate the data that you're collecting, we need to know that you are competent at identifying the insects that are visiting the flowers. And that's how we're going to support you as citizen scientists. We're going to ensure that you're given the knowledge to be able to identify competently, but we're then going to have to test you with a quiz to ensure that you are competent so that we know that the data that you're collecting is valid and it can be used for scientific research. So we've got downloadable resources. This video is being recorded so that you can watch it over and over again and see my lovely face. Or if you prefer, you can download a PDF, which has got the same sort of information in it, a little bit more compacted. And you can use either or. Then once you've had your insect ID lessons, you get to do a fun quiz, which it is fun. I've done it. It's quite cute. If you get at least 80%, you've then passed. So we know that your data is valid because you know how to identify the different types of insects that are visiting the flowers. That's called pre-validation. So we know before you start that you've got the knowledge to be able to provide us with good data. After all that, do I have to complete the quiz? I have to, so you do too. If I want to count my insect pollinators at my place, I've got to do the quiz because that's the only way that we can validate that my data that I'm entering is valid. So I do the quiz. If I get 80%, I then get taken to a link that will take me to the count. If you're a beginner, you would download this video, watch it over and over again, and you would also download the PDF and you can go through that anytime you like. Or if you're a bit of a whiz, if you've been a member of an insect Facebook group or someone like me who has a bit of an idea of what's going on, you don't actually have to go through the learner guides. You can just go straight to the quick quiz. But you have to do the quiz so that we know you know what insects are visiting and the data is useful to scientists and increases our knowledge. So let's start. There are 12 competencies. I'll go through each one individually and we'll learn how to identify each insect. Competency number 1, identify a banded Amegilla bee, aka a blue banded bee. So we've got native banded Amegilla bees, and a lot of people know those as blue banded bees. But of the 14 species of blue banded bee, not many of them have blue bands. So we term them as banded Amegillas, aka blue-banded bees. As you can see here, there's an awful lot of different coloured patterns, and there's, I think, only about 2 or 3 who have got blue bands. So they don't have to be blue-banded bees to be banded Amegilla. But they are bees, and they have specific characteristics that you can, oh yeah, that's a blue-banded bee. So they have the stripes, as you see, with iridescent, a lot of the time they're iridescent sort of colours, but not necessarily blue. But they also have green eyes, large green eyes on the sides of their heads. They've got long antennae, and a lot of the time they will have a little joint here near their face, a little kink. They've got fluffy thoraxes, they're fluffy, except for their body. So their thorax and their head are quite fluffy. The females carry the pollen on the hind legs. Males don't have scope. So that's called a scoper, and that's dry pollen is carried on special hairs on their hind legs. And here you can see she's got blue bands and green eyes and fluffy thorax and long antennae. They've got black stripes with a variety of colours, and their legs are quite hairy. The wings, they've got 2 pairs, but sometimes it is difficult to tell whether they've got 2 pairs of wings or not. So it is hard, especially when they're moving really, really fast. And also when they're resting, they actually tuck their second wing behind the small one. But if they're at rest, you can often see that the wings are a little bit shorter than the end of the abdomen. Banded Amegilla are between 13 and 15 millimetres long, and they're fast, and you can usually hear them before you see them. Fun fact, they're also really important buzz pollinators of many of our native bees, and they're also quite good pollinators of our tomatoes and eggplant that require buzz pollination. And if you look really closely here, this is pollen. These are pollen grains, and she is shaking this flower so much. She's actually hitting her head on it 350 times a second to get that pollen freed from the flower. Competency number 2, native social stingless bees. So there's 11 species of native stingless bees in Australia, and they're in the genera Tetragonula and Australoplegia. They're naturally found mostly along the top half of Australia, but they also they come down the east coast as far as Bega. So what makes a stingless bee a stingless bee? Again, they've got these large eyes on the side of their head, like all bees. They've got long antennae, and they've got a little kink close to the face. The Tetragonula have thick white hair on the side of their thorax, and they're small. They're only about 3 to 5 millimetres long, and they've got black bodies. The Australoplegia are also black all over, except that they have these cream markings on their thorax, depending upon the species. Some have got more that will go up further along. No matter whether they're a Tetragonula or an Australoplegia, they're a little black bee between 3 and 5 millimetres long. Again, they have 2 pairs of wings that are shorter than the body, and as I said, between 3.5 and 5 millimetres long. The Tetragonula, you will see when they're visiting flowers, they actually hover and their legs dangle. That's quite a good characteristic to decide that they are a Tetragonula. Fun fact, did you know that stingless bees nest in relatively large cavities and they store pollen and honey, and that's so that they have food when there's no food available. This is pollen and honey in here, and the colonies are perennial. Competency 3, the other native bees. Australia has more than 2,000 species of native bee. The following features are pretty characteristic of most of our native bees. And so what makes a bee a bee? Bees have got 5 eyes. Did you know that? They've got ocelli, which are these little tiny eyes here, 3, 1, 2, 3, ocelli on the front, on the tops of their head, and they help them navigate. Compound eyes, again, on the side of the face, long and oval shaped, and they help them detect light and colour. Here we have a Lasiglossum. She's got large compound eye on the side of her face. She's got long antennae with a kink near the head. She's got hairy legs, and this is actually the scoper on the back of her leg, and that's where she will carry pollen when she wants to collect it. Again, wings are shorter than the body. Here we have another Lasiglossum, Parasephicodes. Again, we have the large eyes on the side of the face, the kinked antennae. She's got pollen in her scopal hairs on her hind legs. She's got hairy legs as well as the scopal hairs. We've got reed bees here, 2 different species, hence the different sizes. They've got long antennae, and you can see here she's got hairy legs, and she'll carry the pollen to take back to her nest in these hairs. And here you will see that she's got pairs of wings. So this is the front wing, forewing, and the hind wing here. They're not always that cooperative though. And also here you'll see she's got hairy legs, big eyes, antennae. So this is a leafcutter bee, and she again has got the ocelli on the tops of her head, the eye on the side of her face. She's got long antennae with a kink. She's got a hairy body, hairy broad legs, short wings. Here you can really see how they are quite a bit shorter than the abdomen. It's difficult when they've got their abdomen tucked up. And she's carrying pollen. Under her abdomen, a lot of the time you will see female bees carrying pollen. The males don't carry pollen, so it doesn't mean that they're not a bee. But if you see a bee carrying pollen, it's a bee. Males don't have scopal hairs on their legs. This is a male. He's got the oval eyes, the ocelli, the long antennae, and he's even got a modified foreleg. So that's just special. You just get an extra special characteristic there. Fun fact, bees are vegetarian. So the reason why they carry pollen under their abdomen or on their hind legs is because that's the protein source that they feed their offspring. Competency 4. European honeybees. European honeybees were introduced to Australia in 1822. What makes a honeybee a honeybee? They're a bee. So like all the other bees that we've just seen, they've got these large oval eyes on the sides of their head. But honeybees have got black eyes. They have long antennae like other bees with a kink. They have hairy bodies like other bees, but they have pollen baskets. So this is a real characteristic that you will see in social bees. So stingless bees also have pollen baskets, and honeybees have pollen baskets. When you see honeybees out foraging on flowers, they're not always carrying pollen in their baskets, but this is a great characteristic to figure out if they're a honeybee or not. The hind legs are shiny and hairless. Native bees don't have shiny, hairless legs that are broad. So they've got broad basic tarsus here. So that's like the first segment of the foot. And this is an empty pollen basket. So it's a real good characteristic to be able to see when you're trying to identify your bees on flowers. Here we have a pollen basket that's full. So do you see that? That's a honeybee. She's, again, short wings. Her wings are a little bit shorter than the end of her abdomen. And a lot of people don't realise that honeybees come in all sorts of different colours. They vary from almost black on the right-hand side here to orange. And there are also ones that have got almost no dark stripes to them. They have got dark stripes, but they're so orange. So there's a real variation, but it's that characteristics that we're looking for. That hind leg, that is a real honeybee characteristic. They fly quite slowly. So They'll move from one flower to another in waves like this, and they're not easy to scare off. They're quite happy for you to take photos of them. That's why I've got so many photos of honeybees, because they're very photogenic. Again, here we've got a collection of these. They've got dark compared to light or orange abdomens. They've got hairless legs. So this is your hairless legs, and large eyes, short wings, long antennae. So that's your honeybee. Competency 5, identifying hoverflies and droneflies. There's about 160 species of flies in this family. You just need to know that they're a hoverfly or a dronefly. So what makes a hoverfly and a dronefly a dronefly? So the hoverflies are sometimes called slender hoverflies, and they are very slender. They've got a slender, hairless body here. They've got skinny legs with not much hair on them at all. They've only got 2 wings, 1 pair. They've got short antennae. This is your big idea of flies. They've got short antennae, unlike the bees that have got the big long antennae with kink. And they've got large eyes, but they're at the front of their head. So right at the front. This is a dronefly. Only a mother could love it, really. Again, we've got our short antennae, and the eyes are right at the front of the head, almost taking up the whole face. Their faces are a little bit more covered with the eyes. The droneflies are a more sturdy, stocky sort of fly as well. Again, they've got skinny legs. It's hard to see here, but their wings are a little bit longer than their abdomen, unlike bees. Bees' wings are a bit shorter. Here we've got the big, large eyes and the short antennae and the skinny legs. This is typical fly characteristics. Here we've got a hoverfly, short antennae, slim body, eyes at the front of the head, skinny legs, and they hover. So if you see flies just hovering, it's probably a hoverfly or a dronefly. Fun fact, did you know that hoverflies eat aphids? So they're not just pollinators, they're pest controllers as well. And the larvae of some of the droneflies we have lay their eggs in dirty water, brackish water, and those larvae actually filter the water as they develop. Competency 6, identify the other flies. So there's over 7,500 species of fly in Australia, and they're all always annoying us, aren't they? Of those 7,500 species of fly in Australia, the following are typical, except there are always exceptions, because there's always exceptions to the rule. This is a bee fly, by the way, and you might look at that and think, that's a bee, it's not a fly. But look at those eyes and look at those antennae and those skinny, skinny legs. So it's not a bee. Here we have big eyes, short antennae. The eyes are at the front of the head. They're not on the side of the head. And we don't have any ocelli here either. 2 eyes. Short antennae. Another one. This is a march fly we all know and love. Stout body. No waist. So they don't have the waist that a bee will have between the thorax and the abdomen. Again, large eyes in the front of the head, short antennae, skinny legs. Their wings, there's only 2. And they're longer than the body. This one's a bit tricky. Most of you are probably going to go, that's not a fly, that's a mosquito. Well, mosquitoes are actually in the same family as flies, Diptera. But look at those eyes. Short antennae, big eyes, skinny legs. Isn't she pretty? 1 pair of wings, large eyes. At the front, they're a little bit different. They're not as big as some of the ones we've seen, but they're at the front. They're not on the side. They're not long and elongated like the bees' eyes. Again, short antennae, skinny legs. This is one that only a mother could love as well. a robber fly. They ambush their prey and they're pest controllers. They're great. They also eat other things, so it's a balance. Again, short antennae, eyes at the front of the head, skinny legs. And here we have a blowfly, typical blowfly. And did you know that if we didn't have flies, we would be surrounded by rotting matter? We don't want that. Flies are cool. Competency 7, ladybird beetles. There's about 300 species of ladybird beetle in Australia. And so what makes a ladybird beetle a ladybird beetle? They're dome-shaped. They have very short antennae and they have clubbed antennae. So there's a little lump on the end of the antennae, and they've got short legs, and sometimes they actually turtle up, and that's how they defend themselves. Again, only a mother could love it. This is the larvae or larva of a ladybird beetle. So when you see those on your plants, don't think, oh no, it's a grub. It's a larva that's eating aphids and soft-bodied insects to keep your garden nice and happy. They're dome-shaped, unlike a lot of other beetles, which we'll look at in a minute. There are a variety of colours. There's even blue ones. Couldn't find a picture of that though, could I? And they usually just fly in short bursts. They have chewing mouth parts, and we actually occasionally have plagues of them, and they bite people, but they won't hurt you. So, get over it. They're really good. Here we have an adult eating an aphid, scale, mites, aphids. They eat the lot. Keep them. Competency 8. Other beetles. There's over 28,000 species of beetle in Australia, and these features are typical, but of course, there's always an exception to the rule. So what makes a beetle? They've got antennae that they just, want to have long ones. They can have short ones. They can have frilly ones. They can have all sorts of ones. So don't go by the antennae. As I said, they might have beautiful, elaborate ones, and others just might not have any that you can see at all. But they all have hard covers on their bodies, and that's to help protect the wings underneath and also their bodies. These protective covers are called elytra. And when they want to fly, they lift those elytra up and their wings become exposed and they can fly away. And they actually, you can usually hear them because it's sort of a flicker because of the elytra. Their mouth parts are usually chewing, and they fly in bursts, short bursts. So you'll be watching your flower and suddenly this beetle will come diving in very unceremoniously usually. They can be absolutely beautiful, as these ones are here. Fun fact, there are more than 300,000 species of beetle in the world, biggest family in the insect world as well. Competency 9, butterflies, moths and skipper. So there's 400 species of butterfly, 20,000 species of moth and 120 species of skipper. So you don't need to know the difference between a butterfly, a moth and a skipper. You just need to know it's a butterfly or a moth or a skipper. This is a butterfly. They've all got these big wings that are covered in the overlapping scales that often give them quite glorious colours and shimmeriness. They can be dull or they can be quite exquisite. The mouth parts are usually got this long proboscis that they put into the flower to suck up nectar. And they've got compound eyes. They're not huge, but they're pretty big compared to their head, I suppose. And butterflies have got clubbed antennae, and they hold their wings vertically when they alight on the flower. Moths, again, big wings, big expansive wings covered in these scales that give them this shimmer. Their antennae aren't clubbed. They're often quite elaborate, and sometimes you can't actually see the antennae because they fold them along their body. But again, these wings that are covered in these scales. So that's that's a moth, butterfly or skipper that's got these wings covered in scales. And this is a skipper, which looks a lot like a butterfly or a moth. Same group. Their wings are held a bit higher, their heads are a bit broader, and they've got thicker ends to their antennae. But again, it's just a butterfly, a moth, or a skipper. Doesn't matter in the category that you put your data into. It's either a butterfly, a moth, or a skipper. You don't actually have to tell the difference between them. Fun fact, that caterpillars of butterflies, moths, and skippers eat all day and all night. Competency 10, native wasps. There's over 14,500 species of wasp in Australia, and these are just some of the characteristics that will help you identify them. They have oval eyes, very much like bees, on the side of their head. They've got long antennae, just like bees, but they've got more of a triangular head shape than bees do. They've got skinny legs. They have a waist, like bees do. So here we have another different type of wasp. They often have this pointy abdomen, and sometimes you'll actually see the stinger or ovipositor protruding. You won't see that in bees. They've got skinny legs, and some of them even have what's called emarginate eyes. So here, it's hard to see. There's a little notch out of the eye that's on the side of the head. That's called an emarginate eye. This wasp, the emarginate eye is a little more obvious. Some of them are quite hairy, but the hairs are quite simple, like our hair. It's just a simple strand. They're not fluffy. And they've got this narrow basy tarsus. So our bees have a broader leg here, and the wasps have skinny legs. This is a flower wasp. Many, many people will mistake that as a bee, but she's not really fluffy. So those hairs are very, very simple, and she's got skinny legs. Fun fact, wasps are great pest controllers as well as pollinators. So here we've got a caterpillar, and this wasp is taking that back to her nest to provision, and she'll lay some eggs on that, and her offspring will eat it. Yum. Competency 11, European wasps. They were first found in Australia in 1959, and unlike our native wasps, they're an aggressive insect. So what makes a European wasp a European wasp? They've got black eyes, and they're also emarginate. They've got this notch, black eyes. Their thorax is mostly black, and then they've got these few yellow markings around the edge of the thorax. Their abdomen is mostly yellow, and then they've got some of these triangular, quite distinctive triangular stripe. They've got black antennae. Yes, some of our native wasps have black antennae, but they have to have these other characteristics as well, like yellow legs, black eyes, emarginate eyes, black thorax, yellow abdomen. They're very fast. You'll often see them around cars, around the bumper bars of cars, because they're actually hunting the carcasses of dead insects off the bumper bars of cars. And people think that they're bees because they're yellow and they're black. And so they think they're bees because they're hovering around, and they are so fast. They're actually very seldom observed on flowers, and it's usually when they're hunting prey that they will be around flowers. So they won't sit still for very long. So when you're looking at a wasp, and if you think, oh, I think that's a European wasp, one, is it sitting still and drinking nectar? Okay, what are the other characteristics that you're looking for? Black antennae, black eyes, black thorax, yellow legs. Here we've got a paper wasp, and this one's got yellow antennae. Here, this is another wasp. It's got black and yellow stripes, but they're not as vibrant as the European wasp. Here we've got one that often gets mistaken for a European wasp because it's black and yellow. But look at those antennae. They're not black, they're yellow. And those legs aren't all fully yellow. And it's as much black as it is yellow. Here we've got another one. Yes, yellow legs like a European wasp, but those antennae, they're yellow as well. European wasps have black antennae and as much yellow as black on that abdomen. A lot of people would mistake this for a European wasp, but look at those antennae. They're yellow and there's only a little bit of yellow on that black thorax. There needs to be more yellow all around the perimeter, and they're not really stripes. They're not distinct black stripes on a yellow abdomen. This is a native wasp. Fun fact, wasps are great predators of some of the pest insects in your garden. So keep them. They're just great for helping to control pests. Competency 12, the other insects or unknown insects. So this is the category where when you look at the flower, you go, it's not a bee, it's not a flower, a fly. I don't know what it is. So it might be an ant. It could be a grasshopper or a katydid. Then we have Hemiptera, the true bugs. This is a shield bug. And this is a stink bug. It's actually the nymph of a stink bug. This is a jewel bug. So this is the last category that you will have your competencies in. And it will be the one that if you just don't know, put that into this category of unknown. So I know it's a long way around, isn't it? But anyway, here we are. Let's start.